An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6, Chapter 103, Inferno. They slowly walked forward, up the gently sloping incline parallel to the rich face, eyes not breaking contact with the 6 walkers watching them intently. Among the 6, in the middle, waited the Night King himself, small smirk on his lips. "We take them together," Bran muttered flatly, eyes glowing orange and blade expanding into a great sword rivaling ice. One the thin warlock knight wielded as effortlessly as he would a stiletto knife.
"Nah, I was thinking of abandoning you and taking the field,"
Jon japed, the 2 brothers sharing one last chuckle together, as if transported back to the serene days before the journey to Pentos. A lifetime ago it seemed. Closing his eyes to the howling wind, Jon felt the crackling flames on Longclaw's rippled steel growing ever hotter. Across the snowy plain, the walkers readied their blades of ice. 2 swords, 2 spears, and a dual wielder.
"We will fight with you till the end, Great One. If any of you die by the end of the fight,"
the Night King replied coldly, never letting his gaze drift from his targets,
"you better hope it's by their hand and not mine."
Raising his glaive directly at the 2 living, the ice shimmered until cold fire erupted to cover it in an inferno, freezing the air around it.
"Time to end this."
Eyes glowing a bright blue, he stepped forward, marching ever faster until breaking into a low jog, his guards right behind him. Spinning his sword and twirling his wrists, Jon cut fiery slashes into the air.
"Let's roll."
He and Bran jogged themselves, illuminating the darkness around them as if by a tongue of dragonfire.
"Winter brings fire and blood, arsehole."
Rapidly the distance closed and closed until they could see the whites of their eyes. Out lashed the blades, striking true. Sparks showering, Jon rapidly spun in place and slashed straight across the gut of a walker, destroying it instantly before another was upon him. Dual blades chopping through the air as they went for him. Sometimes separately, the demon readied the other for a coming strike, or gearing to parry a blow from the flexible Jon. Others together, trying to overwhelm him. But this was no Arthur Dayne. Fast but sloppy, one the powerful and skilled Emperor began to strike back, sent into a stumble by a fury of slashes, only for a great flash of blue to erupt into Jon's vision, Longclaw darting up to catch the blade of the Night King, the 2 locking eyes. Without the years of training and experience of his older brother, the 3-eyed raven nonetheless had infinite time, a bottomless capacity to practice his craft. The walkers attacking him were tyros in comparison, but there were many of them. He twisted and twirled, blade crackling at each hit it took, arm often raised to block an attack, shrouded in protective energy. He had seen his father save himself from Arthur Dayne in the same way, and it served Bran equally well. A spear darted out for him, but Bran dodged it, flinging the demon to the side with a pulse of energy, before another was upon him, sword spinning to catch the inhuman rapid movements. Cold fire and dragon fire collided to form a bright, brilliant orange, Jon flicking his wrists to catch the glaive as the Night King twirled. Lurching back, Longclaw thrusting to graze the Night King on the side, gouging a shallow scar in the King of Death's icy skin. Blue eyes glowing bright in surprise, Marden snarled an inhuman screech and lunged, only for Jon to kick him in the chest, sending him sprawling. A slash from behind cut through a gap in the Valyrian steel plate, slicing across Jon's back. He cried out at the freezing pain, whirling around with fire in his eyes. The bare-chested walker, straggly hair and beard flowing in the wind, raising his sword to swipe again at Jon, ice shield ready to bash the Emperor. A violent upward parry nearly knocked the blade out of his hand, while Jon caught the edge of the shield, ripping it from the walker, quickly fastening it to his own arm to absorb the walker's attack, so that Longclaw could block the Night King's glaive, returning to the fight. Hissing, popping, the 3-eyed raven angled downward to block a wild swing from a bold walker. It slid off, energy disappearing and then reforming on the other side of the grip, twisting to meet the new threat. Swords clashing, Bran twirled, hitting the second walker across the side of the face. The pulse of energy punched straight through him, shattering it into 1,000 specks of ice. Hearing the first walker rise, he shot another pulse of energy straight for it, knocking it back several yards. Noticing a walker charge at Jon, Bran focused his might and drove it into the icy cold, pain surging through him almost immediately, but persisting nonetheless. Crash! Attack! Parry! Repeat. Over and over the same attack pattern continued, sparks and flame filling the air as Longclaw darted between the Night King and the Son of Craster. Ice shield absorbing blow after blow, but suddenly the Night King swung his glaive, cold fire painting all across him in a malevolent blue, before chopping down, shattering the shield and scorching Jon's left hand. He cried in pain, just barely deflecting a flurry of blows before a punch to the jaw sent him reeling. Clang! In charged a walker, dual blades darting out to clash against the glaive. Jon gazed in shock until meeting the milky white eyes.
Bran, you magnificent bastard.
His brother driving the fight against the Night King, Jon turned all his attention to the bearded walker. Flames slamming against the demon's longsword as he doubled his assault. Father, duck! Sensing the diving signature of his dragon, Jon swiped hard and dove to the left, rolling into the snow. It stung his wounds, Jon letting out a wince. White flashed through the air as he brought Longclaw up, parrying a blow from the bearded walker, much as he had at Hardhome. A sharp kick sent him back just as the shrieking dive pierced his entire hearing. Warmth burned him, searing his insides as he fought, the glaives freezing, fire hissing as they clashed with dual longswords. His creation was fast and skilled, but he was faster and more skilled. No, the threat was different. A battle of wills. Ice against fire. A magic he had not seen since a long time forgotten by all but him.
He is a warlock.
Again the Night King surged his mental control, fighting the hold the three-eyed raven had over the Son of Craster. Sending a flurry of cold and ice to break the connection. Replace the milky white with the blue of his power. A stab of flame crashed into his mind, one so powerful as to break the mental lock.
Fuck, I'll do it myself.
Grinding his teeth in a bared snarl, Marden chopped with his glaive with a flurry yet unseen, shattering the swords and burying the blade into the turned walker's neck, head flying clean off as the body dissolved into the wind. Bran nearly collapsed, knocked back at the rage from the Night King. Just on the cusp of defeating the demon's will, a triumph of the old raven's power that even the first raven hadn't been able to achieve, wiped out in the physical realm. He felt drained, a cold seeping through him. The presence of the darkness and black magic ever present in every white-only greater in Craster's sons. Bran bearing his own soul in order to turn it. The very air seemed to ripple around him. Eyes wide, Bran summoned a shield of mystic energy and knelt in the snow. Turning his head, the Night King looked up just in time for a Rhaegal to erupt out of the darkness. Dragonfire roaring from his maw to detonate upon the ground, flinging the demon over a dozen yards into the distance, blazing a solid wall of flame to cover the ground in conflagration. Roaring almost pure white in heat, before Marden could scramble to his feet and aim his glaive, the dragon was gone, banking away to the right.
Thanks, boy,
Jon offered, smiling softly. The smile turned into a frantic frown as he leapt to his feet, blade twirling madly as two walkers swiped attack after attack. Standing, brushing the snow off his shoulders, the Night King found the glowing figure through the darkness, orange pulses emphasized by the wall of dragonfire, as Bran readied his blade. Only a few seconds clicking by before the two charged at each other again. Line break. Atop the walls there was pandemonium. Whatever rally the arrival of the Empress had given collapsed at the spear fire from the walkers, using their javelins in a direct fire roll that blasted the battlements. Men tumbled over the side, heavy shields and chainmail protecting their bodies but weakening their footwork, allowing the whites to rally and erupt over the walls. Mouths agape in shrieking snarls and weapons hacking and stabbing frantically. "Fall back!" Podrick Payne screamed, waving commands to the other hoplites as Rickon Stark hefted an unconscious Tyrion Lannister over the shoulder, knocked out by a hilt blow to the head. The spearmen stabbed forward with their short swords, holding the frenzied whites back while the remaining defenders atop the front battlements withdrew deeper into the castle. some following the defenders across the walkways or banging against the tower doors. Most of the wights leapt on the ground of the courtyard below, many bodies breaking or twisting into knots right in front of the unsullied shield well.
"Kill them all!"
Grey Worm snarled, spear stabbing into a wight that was just coming to, dragonglass caving in the monster's skull. In a fluid motion, the tight shield wall opened, each unsullied darting their spear points at the recovering wights, drawing their shields back to protect their exposed chests as the dead charged at them. Slamming against the wall, hacking and clawing with their swords, axes and bare hands. Hoplites in the rear extinguished the blue eyes with their own spears, but not before 2 wights took down a dozen of their spearmen. And this was only with the gentle flood of wights charging over the walls, hundreds compared to the tens of thousands crashing against the gate. Pouring from the battlements, Tormund Giantsbane readied his axe, rallying hundreds of free folk warriors on the flank of the wights. "Forwards! For King Crow!" A guttural cry rose up as they charged into the fray, protecting the unsullied and sating their still massive bloodlust. Within the connecting walls between the castle and Wintertown, thousands of hand cannons unleashed their deadly fusillades at the sustained assault from thousands of wights, ammunition rapidly dwindling at an alarming rate. Raised Mammoth, their eyes glowing a bright, haunting blue, led the charge. Walkers rode them, unleashing freezing gusts of wind and snow into the faces of the defenders, blinding them, covering the charge. Leaping from the Mammoth to personally engage the defenders above. Carrying driftwood logs and other debris, the wights dropped them onto the walls as the makeshift ladders, braving the firepower of the living to scramble up. Engaging the Riverland men-at-arms and dismounted Dothraki in a contest to the death. All the while the Mammoths crashed against the walls, stones cracking and mortar crumbling against the onslaught. Countless acts of pure courage predominated. Edmure Tully, the fecklessness and stupidity of his youth long forgotten as he fought like a wild animal. Dragonglass sword shattering 2 walkers before a dozen wights forced him back to the shield wall behind his bannermen. Edric Dane, dual swords chopping through the icy air as he decapitated dozens of wights. Jaime Lannister racing out of the main castle with Brienne of Tarth and 100 of his best men-at-arms to cover the exodus of the wounded, taking a sword slash to the chest but embedding the attacking wight with his arm-attached daggers. Sir Mackenzie, bandolier stuffed with a dozen dwarf cannons where he blazed at every wight that scrambled atop the battlements. Hundreds of Dothraki, bravado abandoned as they fought for their lives. A chaotic melee that collapsed when 5 separate Mammoths, nearly all remaining firepower concentrated on them, crashed through the walls. Pre-positioned cannon blasted chunks off them, sending them to the ground, but the thousands of wights behind them simply swarmed around them, filling the corridor like an onrushing flood. A scream pierced the din, Sansenya and Rhaella screaming down dousing the attacking swarm in dragonfire. The great Edaron close behind, scorching thousands before a flurry of ice spears forced the Princess Arya to break off. It lessened the flood but did not stop it, merely allowing Jaime, Edmure and the Dothraki Blood Riders to shepherd their men within the walls, gatehouses snapping shut behind them, reducing the remaining strong points to 2, Wintertown and the castle itself. Knuckles bloody and raw, Tormund found the pain sting invigorating as the fist cracked with a right hook, knocking a wight to the ground before he turned, axe cutting across another's shoulder. "Come on, you shit!" he screamed at all the other free folk, surging into the cluster of the dead. "Fuck 'em all!" He then winced in pain from a rusted knife slicing through his side. The large, fresh wight before him dug the blade in deep, jaw opened in a shriek. Tormund headbutted the monster, face burning, nose likely broken, and hot blood running down his cheeks, tongue tasting the metallic, slippery liquid. He howled the wildling battle cry and buried his axe in the wight's skull. A roar rang out behind the gatehouse, wood and steel rattling from an immense force behind it. Waves of howls and groans only intensifying with each boom against the gate.
"Tormund!"
He turned to find Robb Stark, thrusting a torch in his hand.
"Giant at the gate!"
Already the wood was splintering. the Lord of Winterfell slicing a wight in half, twirling the Valyrian steel greatsword as if it were weightless, and stabbing it through another.
Gotta get to that cannon!
Sure enough, halfway between the unsullied line and the gate, rested the mud-splattered steel tube of a cannon. Wheel snapped in half and toppled over. Drawing his own dragonglass blade, Tormund waved the torch in the air. Free folk! With the southern kneeler! What few remaining arrows they had in their quivers smacked into the snarling wights. Knives and axes lashing out as a dozen warriors formed a circle around Tormund and Robb. Wiping the blood off his cracked nose with his furs, Tormund leapt with Robb across the carnage of the cannon, and took down 2 wights with their furious slashes. Load it! Load it! As the wights tried to storm them, the free folk fought to turn the cannon around in the mud, passing powder and shot before the dead cut them down, iron groaning and wood shattering as the dead giant nearly was through the gate. Smashing the torch across the head of the skeleton, Tormund turned to see the cannon loaded but unattended, moving to light the barrel just as a spear rammed through his gut. Staggering, burying his knife into the wight's neck, almost absent-mindedly, he clutched the wound, one he knew was approaching mortal, and pushed himself towards the cannon, falling to his knees as the steel portcullis collapsed to the ground with a clatter, giant roaring as it stepped into the gatehouse, wights swarming around its legs, eyes focused ravenously at the unsullied line. Giant beginning its charge just as Tormund brought the torch to right to the fuse of the cannon. The muzzle erupted in a tongue of yellow-white fury, shards of dragonglass fountaining out straight into the rotting flesh of the giant, puncturing holes through it, blue leaving its eyes, toppling over to collapse onto the dozen charging wights. Whooping in triumph, Robb's celebration turned to ashen at the fallen wildling. Tormund! He rushed to him, sheathing ice. Come on, let's get you out of here. Blood gurgled out of his mouth. Tormund pushed Robb away. Go! Tell Kid Crow I died like a proper free folk. Torn, Robb nevertheless complied, racing towards the unsullied line as the wights began to surge through the now open gate. Weakly gripping the torch, Tormund saw the open chest filled with powder. At least I'll finally be fucking warm. The wildling chieftain laughed through the blood and pain as his hand dropped the torch into the chest, not feeling the clawing hands of the wights digging into his dying flesh, before all were incinerated in a gout of white-hot flame. Line break. Anguished screams of death choked the godswood. Corpses of men and beast lined to approach its walls, fighting especially furious here, dead mixing with the iron-born marines, Crannog men, and Stormlanders manning the walls and underbrush. What had been the beautiful and serene refuge for the kings of winter had descended into a charnel house rather rapidly. Yara Greyjoy howled, short sword hacking a corpse's head clean off. Her brawlers weren't land fighters, but brawlers were excellent against a mindless horde. Hooked swords, axes, and fishing pikes bristled against the walls, hacking and stabbing at the piles of wights trying to scramble atop the battlements. My lady! Screamed a reaver, blood pouring from a wound in his gut. Already dozens of wights were swarming over onto the walls, dead ironborn carpeting the stone. But such wasn't what he pointed at. Behind, a great black dragon, rearing its head, orange-red surging forth. Bones aching, Yara grabbed the man and jumped off, falling to the snow below as the flames shot forth. With a thunderous roar, Balerion unleashed his dragonfire, scorching the entirety of the slaughtered battlements. White incinerated into ash, flames billowing out to ignite upon hundreds more beyond the walls. Able to fly anywhere, like a dutiful son, he stayed behind to defend his mother, charging forth and bending his neck over the walls, mouth chomping over the head of a giant, razor-sharp teeth ripping through flesh and crunching bone to wrench its head and right shoulder clean off, tossing the putrid flesh out into the void. Saracen jerking back, Daenerys ducking as a snarling monster swung at her, rusted axe shooting overhead to chop away its snowy air. She angled the curved steel upward and stabbed, running the white through the middle. One anguished screech, and it fell limp to the ground. Crying much as Balerion did when burning Krasnus Mokaraz in Astapor, Daenerys charged and swung her blade right at a racing corpse, cutting it perfectly in half. A flash to her right ended with a leaf atop a Shadowcat, dual Dragonclaw's daggers buried in its throat. Arya wasn't far behind, short sword slicing through the thick muscles and bone of another's leg, toppling it into a writhing mass until she could finish it off with cat's paw. To her left, Gendry decapitated 3 whites with one swing of Warhammer, the Lord of Storm's End covered in blood and gore, muscles rippling in the fury of the fight. "No!" Dany screamed as a white leapt on Jorah, dagger stabbing into his side. It raised the blood-soaked blade to plunge downward again when Daenerys kicked it off, Valyrian steel chopping it to bits with furious swings, red in her eyes and a piercing scream of anger scorching her throat. "I will not lose another I care for!" Around her, the whites continued to pour over the lips of the battlements, unstoppable, even against the power of the Black Dread reborn. Blue eyes narrowing, the walker in command drew back his spear, waiting for the great dragon to fully raise its torso. All around him erupted into flames, Edaron and Arya passing straight overhead and incinerating scores of whites. The walker was unharmed, but its aim distorted. Balerion let out a screech of agony as the spear shot past his shoulder, slicing deeper through the gouges made by Valthrax, boiling the dragon's blood, gouging through all over the battlements. It fought the icy burns, Balerion releasing the gutted mammoth carcass to the pitch black into the godswood itself. The scene knocked Dany out of her rage. "Balerion!" Without delay she raced across the snow, leaping over bodies to reach her son. "My darling!" she muttered, rubbing her icy cold hand over his warm scales, feeling the blood of the dragon heat her skin. A low growl left Balerion, only causing Dany to hug his snout. "No! Rest here! Stay safe!" An arrow whizzed past her head, smacking into the charging white. "Daenerys! The battlements!" Following Mira's hand, whites were hauling up onto the charred and blackened stone, taking advantage of the chaos. Already, Yara was rallying her surviving men, as was Gendry. Dany added her cry to the mix. "Follow your Empress!"
Protect the Empress!"
Jorah hissed beside her, heartsbane in the air. The cry was infectious.
"Protect the Empress!"
These men and women would follow her to the 7 hells had she asked. Forward they surged, racing up the staircases with Daenerys at the van. Valyrian steel slashing, cutting a white across the front with a deep gash, sending its still form tumbling over the side. 2 waves crashing against each other in a melee of writhing bodies. Rearing Warhammer for another strike, Gendry was suddenly kicked to the ground, Dragonglass of the Stormland's men-at-arms flying over, only to be battered aside by the White Walker leaping atop the battlements. Charging to protect her husband, Arya slashed at the monster's legs, only for it to jump back with an amazing agility for its size, great sword swinging at the wild wolf of Winterfell. Arya rolled to the side, ice smacking against the stone, only to be drawn by the side as Daenerys swung at it. Blades clanging, Walker punched out, slamming into Dany's gut. The Dragon Empress held it together enough to run the Saracen through the Walker's stomach, disintegrating it. Sucking in a breath, her chest burning with each heave, Daenerys reached out her hand, pulling Arya up with a grunt. "Thanks," mumbled the Lady of Storm's End, shrugging off the flecks of ice that had scattered over her. "Any time," Daenerys smiled, while a flicker to her left caught her vision. A walker stepping forward toward the outer gate of the Godswood, smirk on his lips as he slammed his spear against the doors. Slivers of ice spread out like rivulets of poison from a dagger wound, spider cracks forming in the wood and metal portcullis beneath it. Dread formed in her stomach. "Mira!" Spotting it, Mira grabbed an arrow from her quiver and loosed it at the walker, Dragonglass head shattering it like a sledgehammer to stone. But the damage was done. Gate nothing more than a brittle glass as the thunderous shriek left the maws of thousands charging at the Godswood. Walls forgotten.
"Spears and shields!"
yelled Gendry, waving Warhammer through the gale.
"My queen!"
Dany found Jorah in lockstep beside her, Arya to her other side.
"It's best if I stay by your side."
She nodded. "The honour is mine, Jorah Mormont." Belerion roared behind her. Wounded, but not yet out of the fight, he lit the fire within every defender of the godswood. Good or ill, the end would come soon. Line break. Dreadful, painful screeching thundered through the air as Rhaegal fanned the flames, burning the same stretch of ground before disappearing yet again. The sounds of the great inferno and the frantic howling of the wind around it masking the clashes of ice against steel, cold against heat. Even to the Emperor's ears, all he could hear was the roar of fire and snow as they crashed against each other, draping him in a surreal aura, while he lunged with Longclaw at his two assailants, forcing them back. The walkers darted back, dancing with him, trying to tire him out before lunging at him once more. Spears thrusting to distort while the great sword sliced high to behead them. Nearly all fighters would find themselves in the afterlife, but not Jon. Trained by the best, having fought against the best. A quick jerk of the arm sent the spear in a wide arc, left hand deftly bringing the sword up to block the slash. Dragon fire welling inside him, he yelled hoarsely, charging forward yet again. Even with the magic of the children coursing through him, Bran could feel the fatigue. Forced to draw further from the well of power the Winterfell wayward gave him, channeling it to surge into his blade, into his muscles, forcing the Night King to retreat. Blade wheezing against the burning glaive. A hacking cough as Marden jerked to the other side to crash against him. Gaze firm, movements fluid, leaping back without a hint of tiredness. Bran twirled his energy blade, lunging with a slash that was deftly parried. Double thrusting deflected in as the air shimmered with the cold. A spin bringing Bran to a crouch, swiping at the Night King's legs, missing him by an inch. The demon jumped to dodge, fight continuing unabated in a steady stalemate. Slashing across his hand, Jon grit his teeth and thrust, ignoring the pain as the bare-chested walker fell back, dark red blood sprinkling against the snow. He kept moving, walkers a hazy blur, watching their eyes, searching the blue orbs for hints while furiously attacking. Quickly parrying, bending back, kneeling, jumping, letting them grow angrier, and thereby more sloppy. The searing heat of his roaring Valyrian steel slowly chipping away at enchanted ice. One eye always kept through the dragon fire at his brother, fighting alone against the Night King. Uppercut forward. Bran's superheated fist missed the Night King by mere inches. Both forced to step back several paces. Bran bringing up his blade while the Night King twirled his glaive, clasping firmly in his hands, breasting diagonally. Impassive scowl no longer. Now he seethed. Now he snarled. The last in the line of many mortals that served as the vessels of the gods for the children, made manifest now before him. The winds around him howled, the Night King charging with a furious flurry of side slashes. One's Bran parried, denied any opening. The second youngest of the Starks despaired, legs beginning to burn as the mystical energy neared its limit. I cannot defeat him! Orange and blue flashes filled his eyes. He just wanted to rest.
Your goal is not to defeat him.
A voice, one he hadn't heard in a long time. Brynden Rivers.
You know what you must do, Brandon Stark.
Chopping downward, the orange energy sizzled onto the cold fire of the glaive.
Allow Jaehaerys to do what Sorin could not.
Blades breaking apart, Bran allowed the calmness of certainty to flow through him. Kicking the bearded walker in the chest, Longclaw's flames deflecting the spear and forcing the other back, Jon's eyes flickered to his brother, seeing their duel through Rhaegal's flames, just in time to watch as the Night King spun, catching Bran's exposed chest, and running the glaive through his stomach. No! Bran felt it as a push. A punch to the gut that stopped short of kicking the wind out of him. Minorly discomforting. He knew the pain would come later. Weakness and unbearable pain, even in the raging cold. Already, An inky black shroud started to ooze out of him, only to disappear into could feel the legs giving way. One last surge of energy erupting to bury his sword into the Night King. Hand with it, fingers clasping onto something solid within. As the Night King withdrew the glaive, flames igniting on it once more, Bran fell bonelessly to the ground. Eyes wide, legs useless, all magic gone to leave a pale, gaunt young man limp in the snow. No wound on Marden's icy frame, and a dragonglass shard in Bran's hand. Bellowing a thunderous war cry, Jon crashed Longclaw against the bold walker's ice spear, shattering it in two from the first assault. A spin decapitated the walker through the middle, ice billowing away in the wind. The bearded walker swiped with its greatsword, but Jon dodged, right hook smashing into the walker's jaw, sending it toppling to the ground, finished off by Jon's snarling downward thrust. Flames roaring high. The Emperor of the living and the King of the dead stared at each other, Jon shock still, trembling with dragonfire in his eyes, while the Night King paced, a hungry predator unsated by his recent kill, stalking, taunting, expressionless except for the smug anger in his glowing eyes. Jon's gaze drifted back to Bran, rage unfaltering, scar throbbing in the memory of their last confrontation, fiery grey catching blue, the fear immolated in dragonfire. Two ready to duel for the world itself. One bathed in an icy cold, the other in a searing heat. One ready to snuff out all light, the other ready to take the night. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Holy moly, so both Tormund and Bran. Oh my heart. Oh, that hurts. Oh, that was sad. That was really sad. Anyway, one thing I would like to note with Bran is that he did something that some people associate with the ancient Arthurian legendary figure of Mordred, allowing a deadly blow to hit himself in order to also strike a deadly blow upon his foe. He let the Night King stab him so he could take the Dragonglass core, which, as you know from listening to this fic, is one of the sources of the Night King's power, allowing yourself to be killed in order to leave yourself vulnerable. Oh, Bran. Anyway, you know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. See ya!